Welcome to Silverstone for the annual British round of the Blancpain GT Series Endurance Cup. Pre-qualifying is about to get underway. Indeed, the green flag has just been shown and cars are heading out on track for 1 hour of track activity. It is a mighty entry that we have this weekend. 55 cars on track. John Watson and David Addison trackside looking forward to what's going to be another interesting hour. We had at the end of free practice, perhaps understandably, because he's a quick driver, Jonny Adam, the fastest in the Pro-Am Aston Martin. How much you read into these sessions is up to you, really, because they're running on old tyres and the purpose is to get the car ready and to cycle through different drivers. But even so, John, it was a very impressive effort by Jonny Adam this morning.
Yet again, a driver jumping into a car, didn't do a huge number of laps, but right on the pace from the very moment he left the pit lane. And what an example Jonny Adams sets to the pro driver in a Pro-Am car. Gets in the car, nails it, does a stunning time, quickest overall, and that time of 2 minutes 00.5. Well, that's the time to aim for all 55 cars out on track, or will very shortly be out on track as we go into the second free practice session. Track conditions different, ambient temperatures different, wind blowing, I suppose you might say, from yes, that direction. And of course, we hear so much these days about how much wind affects cars going into corners. These are substantial cars, so probably the wind effect not going to be so noticeable. Nevertheless, it's a factor, and some drivers factor that in to their view of how their laps will have gone.
Now there, coming down to Brooklands, just being overtaken, in fact, is 97, the Aston Martin, Jonny Adam at the wheel. Jonny, factory Aston Martin driver, so he does this programme, he does the World Endurance Championship, he does British GT as well. So he's driving with different co-drivers, different circuits, he's working with different teams. Jonny was saying to me at Monza that he does his homework on all of this. He makes sure he knows who's in the entry, so he knows who he's going to be racing against, tries to get a feel for their styles of driving. He looks at the balance of performance as well, so he knows which cars are going to be strong and what he might end up racing against. Whereas other drivers just rock up, get in and go for it. But Jonny says, I'm a bit of an anorak when it comes to my preparation, and he does the job properly.
Oh no, and clearly he does. I mean, he's very analytical about his approach to motor racing, and in fact you might call that in general terms good preparation. And normally you find the drivers that are the ones that are getting the most success. We keep referring to somebody being lucky or unlucky. Well, there's an example of a racing driver who actually, you might say, doesn't need luck because he's done the hard yards.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is the summary of what makes a good driver or a great driver, as opposed to that of the others that are maybe there for the ride.
Now, 23 Nissan is going to be Alex Buncombe. We didn't see very much of Alex in the morning session. They were a little bit defeated at Monza, certainly 23 because it had damage, but they weren't the quickest of cars around Monza. But Silverstone has always been good for Nissan.
In fairness, I spoke to Bob Neville this morning, and the 22 car we know was right on the pace. The 23 car, they believe they had a slight down of the boost pressure was down about 10 psi or something, which would have had a bearing on the car in qualifying. And then of course it got taken out at that multiple car accident at the beginning of the 3 hours of Monza, so they never really got a clue as to the out and out, the true pace of the 23 Nissan, the car we're currently on board. And Alex Buncombe just letting all these other cars filter through, waiting to get a clear slot before he starts going out and trying to see what he can do. But we've got just over 55 minutes of this session, staying well over to the left, letting all the cars behind filter through. At the end of the day, you've got to make a commitment. He no doubt will do that sooner than later, as the 114 Emil Frey Jaguar makes its way around Stowe. A little bit of a squirrely move at the rear of the car, but tires still on the cooler side. Marco Siegfried behind the wheel, more familiar. Marco Siegfried, of course, last year in the 333 Rinaldi Ferrari.
And he's another very quick driver, but perhaps it's a sign of how the Emil Frey team is moving on, that drivers like him, like Stefano Ortelli last year, are prepared to go to what's still an underdog team.
It is, but we did, I think, cover this a little bit at Monza. The Emil Frey team, I think, are looking, or they've actually got they're currently even running, I believe, in Europe, the Lexus, which inevitably, I'm assuming they would love to bring into Blancpain for 2018. That's a team issue, of course, but the Jaguar has become more and more competitive through loyalty to the brand and a lot of hard work and engineering, and bringing on board people like Stefano Telli and others who have got capacity to drag performance out of the car.
And bear in mind, they're up against, for example, Audi or Lamborghini, where there are hordes of those cars dotted around the world bringing back data. Why is the Aston Martin going so slowly? Now, is that just keeping out of the way, looking for clear track space? It's done that for more than a lap now.
I can't think of any logical reason. There may have been a component change in the car, but ordinarily you wouldn't imagine there's a logical reason for Johnny Adam to drive around a fraction of the speed that cars all around him are doing. If you look, 59, Dean Stoneman, a protege, you might say, of Alan McNish certainly taking an interest in Dean Stoneman. He was present at Monza and flagged him down in the pit lane and what are you doing? I can't do my Scottish McNish accent. I'll probably get into more trouble if I do something like that.
Yeah, Dean Stoneman also part of the BRDC's Superstars programme, wasn't he, that Tim Harvey looks after, and Tim was a big champion of Dean after he came back into racing after his very serious illness. He was struck down with cancer, which he thankfully was able, as a fit young guy, to battle through and come back to racing. Initially in powerboats actually, then Carrera Cup, and of course back into single-seaters and now into GT cars with McLaren. Porsche, John, we haven't had a Porsche moment all day.
No, I'm not going to over-egg the pudding because we saw how quick that car at Monza was, and in fact, if that had been a fully pro car, I think potentially could have won the race. But interestingly, who's quickest overall? With just 7 minutes of the session 3, but car 63, Roberto Bortolotti, 2 minutes 01.1. Now that's a little bit slower than this morning's, the time from Johnny Adams, but nevertheless, just goes to show that Grasser Racing, 63 Lamborghini in particular, the 19 car has also been quick, but it's the 63 that really is the quick car on that team pairing. Again, fastest on this current lap, his third flying lap, fastest overall in Sector 1, purple. Goes nice with green, reminds me of a well-known tennis club in South East London.
What about orange, black and white?
How much curb do you want to take? Is that Chris Goodwin behind
it?
I talked to Chris about 10 minutes ago,
right,
and he's going to deliver a 720 for me to have to play around with, he said. But Chris, why do you want to take the inside of the curb and cut the grass? We were having a laugh about some of our observations of him. So there is the onboard shot. Can't really get a glimpse of his eyes to see if he blinks very much during a lap.
Stabbing at the pedals, his feet at the work, and working his way flat out now on the gas up towards Abbey. Does he lift? Does he brake? He brakes.
Oh, interesting. He's a right foot braker.
Yeah, old school.
Exactly. And he was saying his father he's retired from racing now.
Yeah.
But he won historic Formula 3 in Monte Carlo when he was 75. I mean, amazing. No, just phenomenal that you can still compete at that age.
Absolutely,
and win.
Yes, be quick and still enjoy it as well. So Chris Goodwin in an AM Cup car along with Alexander West and the journalist Chris Harris. He's about to be monstered here, isn't he, by the Mercedes that booms past. That's 89, which is the Jules Gounon, Daniele Perfetti car. Who's driving that at the moment?
Well, that was the car. That was
Alex Fontana.
Was that 87 or 89? Is that 89? I can't.
89, I think.
Oh, 89. It was the 87 car with Jules Gounon. That was second quickest. Two Pro-Am cars, fastest and second quickest this morning. But he's still flat out.
Yeah, Chris Goodwin knows his way around Silverstone, doesn't he? He's been racing a long time. 1987 he started in Formula First.
It's interesting just watching the modulation of the throttle pedal. There's not very much between off throttle and on throttle. It's either one or the other. There's no little bit of a balanced play just coming through the sequence of corners at Beckett's through Chapel now onto the straight. One might surmise, but with traction control and other driver aids, that in fact the need to have that kind of throttle modulation in pre-traction control days is pretty much gone.
Yeah, true enough. And Chris knows McLaren's inside out, doesn't he? He's, as you were suggesting a moment ago, he's part of the factory program that develops race and road cars. And he's a good ambassador for McLaren.
It was interesting, again taking lumps of curb on the inside, coming through Club Corner. Just going through the evolution of the McLaren, starting with the MP412C and ending up with the new 720, I think it is an S, which is, they've got a few examples here in the paddock at Silverstone, and how his role in that evolution, and he looks back at what he did 5-6 years ago to where they are with the current car, and it's, if I'd had more time I could have done this. Usual engineer's approach, no different really to a driver, just the commitment and focus and desire to always continually improve.
Now you're on board with Roberto Bortolotti in 63. This car 10th at the end of free practice, the Andrea Caldarelli, Christian Engelhardt shared car. And Roberto Bortolotti again does the first driving duties in the session, as I think he does in the race as well from memory, working his way down through Vale towards Club Corner, and actually he's managed to get a pretty clear circuit.
Yeah, and the course of doing so, he's ended up just 1/10 of a second slower than the time Johnny Adam achieved earlier in the day, when track conditions, temperatures and the ambient temperature were considerably lower. So Roberto Bortolotti on that last lap certainly virtually comparable to the best we saw. Looking to see the split times down. Yeah, he's done 0.8 of a second on the first sector. So this lap would not expect to see even matching the previous quick lap he just scored. 75 Audi, that's popped up into second place. Adrian Amutz. Is it Amutz? No, it's not. Oh, it's dropped. It is. No, it was Christian. It was Christian.
Christopher Hauser. No, where am I looking?
It's third place.
Clement Schmidt.
Clement Schmidt.
That's right.
That's who it was.
So you've got what? Lamborghini from Mercedes from Audi at the moment. Indy Doncia going strongly in the man-filter Team HTP Motorsport Mercedes. As Roberto Bortolotti still hasn't blinked. Up towards the timing line.
It's amazing when you get that view of a driver's concentration. I mean, it's quite difficult to not blink, either consciously or unconsciously, because you get dust or particles in your eyes. But it's a function of his depth of concentration that he's. You got a little bit of a twitch on there.
Made him concentrate there.
Yeah.
Still didn't blink.
Yeah, I mean, it's
extraordinary, isn't it?
It is extraordinary.
I mean, this is what, a third of a lap at least.
I wonder, did he go back and look at the onboards that we did at Brands Hatch? They just blink now coming down Hanger Straight. But it's, if you blink, normally most people will blink probably every 2 or 3 seconds. They don't realise that they're doing it. But to hold your eyes open for that duration, and inside a race car, there's lots of things, particles that you cannot necessarily see flying around, and that gets into your eyes and it causes irritation.
No, as you say, it's a mark of the concentration. It's extraordinary.
His last lap, as an example, was 2:01.0 effectively. So it was about just under 0.4 of a second down on his previous best. Looking to see any purples appearing anywhere else. A lot of green. We got purples coming from Juncadella, Daniel Juncadella in the 88 Mercedes, currently all the way down in 42nd, and that car may very quickly find itself into the top 3 or 4. Juncadella was enjoying his notoriety from that mammoth save he had at Brands Hatch coming out of Stirling's Bend. So let's look and see where that 88 Mercedes is going to end up. Purple first sector, purple second sector, waiting for it to come across start-finish line. He's gone quickest!
Excellent. So Juncadella in the car that he shares with Tristan Vautier and Felix Morales. There's 84 Mercedes now pressing on with Jimmy Eriksson at the wheel, and that is Juncadella, I think.
Yeah, it'll be the 88 car, yes.
So moving from the DTM to GT racing this year. A rather happier environment I think he's in as well.
I think so, and he did express a few opinions about his time in DTM and wondering, was it time well spent, or, I mean, obviously he benefited from the association with working with manufacturers, but as a career move coming from single seaters, I think he's a much happier racing driver in GT racing, albeit here Silverstone in the Blancpain endurance, and slowed right down looking for a bit of track space, having achieved fastest time overall, and that's the quickest lap we've seen so far this weekend by about 1/10 or so, maybe just under 1/10 of a second. And expecting to see in qualifying, which will not be today, it'll be on Sunday morning, when people will use the best of their rest and maybe a new set of tyres to get into the 1:59 time.
We had the Porsche spin at Brooklyn, so there'll be a yellow flag there if it doesn't get going soon.
That must be a mistake.
There it is.
Oh!
Beautifully done.
Oh, I didn't notice that. Anyway, he's got it going again.
Exactly, yes. Robert Renauer is probably the gun in that car as well, so rare that he's the one that spins it in number 911, the 911 GT3, and he will pit.
So I would imagine we've got quite a lot of people in the pit looking at it. Looks all red on the page 1, totally red on page 2, and virtually so hardly any cars actually on track. A great time if you want to go out and get a clear run and try and get maybe 2 or 3 laps in. So third, I can't read the timing and scoring. It's a 26.
26. Christopher Hassel's gone third. Yeah.
So Audi beginning to creep up.
And then fourth Ferrari, Daniel Karlovitz,
absolutely,
who is another of these drivers that's under the radar.
Absolutely, I was going to say Karlovitz in one of the Pro-Am cars, and again showing very strongly indeed.
So there is Daniel Juncadella pressing on, nephew of Luis Sala, former Grand Prix racer, and Daniel's parents, former racers as well.
Yeah, and on the grid at Brands having a chat about other relations. I mean, very well related indeed. One driver from the 70s, late 60s, Alex Solaroig.
Yes.
Who I think is indirectly one way or the other a part of his family.
Oh, right.
There's another one called Jorg de Bagration or something like that. I think it's hard to remember.
Okay.
Again, Solaroig and whatever it's called.
Oh, right.
Raced in Formula 2 in 68, 69, I think.
Jules Gounon in the sister Mercedes has just done the absolute best in the middle sector. Karlovitz has done the absolute best in the first sector. So things are going to start shuffling again, I think, soon. 42 minutes of this session to go. We had a few penalties being offered at the end of free practice for track limits and taking the flag twice and all of that. But actually, we got through that without any real dramas.
Well, let's wait until Sunday. But there has been an additional driver briefing in which I think the clarification of what's permissible has been laid down in no uncertain terms. And in a sense, you can say every driver in the field is on notice and saying that Jules Gounon has just popped up into second place, so Mercedes first and second, and Daniel Karlovitz has got to finish his lap, but that's a quick first sector 4. His personal best in second. He may well find himself top 3 with this time. Michele Rugolo in the 50 Ferrari. That was the pole-sitting car at Monza. You may remember we talked to Rugolo on the grid and got some insight into the team. So it's Juncadella, Gounon, Rugolo, and Roberto Bortolotti.
Karlovitz fifth, better lap time, but doesn't move him up. It was a good effort, though, that. But Rugolo's AF Corsa Ferrari showing better pace in this session than the first, so it's higher up the order.
There we are on board with the Ferrari, coming through the final part of this Beckett's complex onto Chapel. It's the slowest part of that 3-part corner. And then you launch onto the relatively speaking, long straight. And then choose your braking point. Down 3 gears, sometimes maybe only 2, depending. And then squeeze. This is a corner where, in my term, you would squeeze the throttle open. But as we saw from the onboard shots of Chris Goodwin, actually you don't squeeze, it's just off or on. So it's virtually a light switch.
Isn't it? Yeah. It is. Now Karlovitz is on the money again. You're riding with him. Whoops, he's up the curve, he's a bit sideways, and he's got traffic ahead, but he has done the absolute best within sector 1. So Daniel Karlovitz now accelerating towards Abbey. Murphy's Law says he's going to get the traffic in exactly the tightest part, the slowest part.
He's backed out
and he's given up on that lap, hasn't he? Yeah.
But I mean, there's a car driver package, certainly in the hands of Karlovitz, that is going to be a threat in qualifying. So he's had to back out of it. He's decided there's no point running up against other cars than losing your momentum, and also whatever set of tyres he's on, whatever age those tyres are, how many laps they've done, there's no point wasting them by running closely behind, certainly in this sort of free practice session. So keeping the tyre temperature up, getting over to the left-hand side of the road, letting other cars go through, that's good husbandry on the part of Daniel Karlovitz.
We got excited about Nissan earlier, and they've faded a little bit for the moment, because Alex Buncombe is 21st, and Matt Simmons in the sister car is 33rd.
Yes, I mean, probably we'll need to wait just under 40 minutes of the session to go. So teams may try different things. Again, they might just go through all 3 drivers to give them a feel of the car at this time of day, because this is the period in the day when the race will be getting into its second hour. The bright yellow at Mercedes, they've got a wonderful thunder.
Yes, they have.
As they come past. Whatever you got, we'll take anything you got.
Jules Gounon car still sorry, Danny Junqueira's car still the fastest. Jules Gounon second. And Daniel Kalvitz has just pitted.
Alex Fontana has jumped up to 6th place in the Pro Racing BMW. So that's the first of the BMWs getting up into the top 6. Everything kind of stable, settled down. Not seeing too many. The sister car, the 99 BMW, just looking further down, is up to 14th. The 86 up to 19th. That's the HTP Motorsport Mercedes. But again, a lot of the top 20 cars actually back in the pit lane.
As there is the Bentley, which is 8. So that's the Maxime Soulet car. How's Stephen Kane doing? He has just improved in the sister car to go 6th fastest, Stephen Kane. So number 7 Bentley moving up the order, heading for the pit lane in the background, Michele Rugolo.
And Dries van Voor in the Audi number 5, he's improved into the top 10 into 9th place.
First time we mentioned him in ages.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of almost ad hoc the way these times are coming. But a lot of them, or a number of them, have been coming actually when the pit lane has been busy and the racetrack has been, in relative terms, free of traffic. So a good time, as we mentioned, just to get out, have a run. As we look at the number 8 Bentley making its way through this final part, not being too greedy on the exit, but running the curb through Chapel on the inside, then free the car up.
42 McLaren, which is the Stracker car of Oliver Webb, Alvaro Parent and Lewis Williamson. Now, Oliver Webb is not slow, but when Alvaro Parent is behind the wheel of that, it should fly, shouldn't it?
Yes. I mean, Alvaro, as we often talk about, spends his time more transatlantic mid-air than he is behind a racing car. But he is the go-to member of that team. There's the sister, or a sister car, the 58, the Stracker Racing. So any sign of that on the top 20? No, there's not.
No, it's 34th at the moment.
Yeah.
And it's Ben Barnicoat at the wheel.
Ben Barnicoat's been doing, I think, a very, very good job. A young driver, lot of talent, and showing well.
Yeah.
One of the drivers in the McLaren, I think, that has stood out so far this season.
So it's him, Rob Bell and Colm Ledegar. And we didn't really see the best of the McLarens at Monza, partly because of the overall pace and the way that the BOP was working, but also because, of course, the car suffered some damage in the accident and ended up having to restart from the pit lane. But Ben Barnicoat, part of the Racing Steps Foundation of young drivers, Graham Sharp's initiative, presses on, making his way onto the Hanger Straight. A huge enthusiast, Ben Barnicoat, for Formula 1 stock car racing. And when he's not racing, he's to be found on the terraces watching F1 stock cars.
I don't think he needs to make that general knowledge, do you? But the thing I like about Ben Barnicoat is he, as opposed to some people who drive racing cars, I get the sense from what I've watched this year, he's a racing driver.
I agree with that.
And there's a significant difference between the two.
And he's adapted from single-seaters. He was Formula Renault NEC champion, raced and won in Formula 3 last year, now into a GT programme, and loving every minute of it. Part of the BRDC Rising Stars project, there is the 23 Nissan. Now, that had gone to Lucas Ordonez, hadn't it? And that's 78 in Strife, Miguel Ramos.
Yeah, one of the Barwell cars.
Yeah, that's over at Farm. Well, it started at Abbey, and he's on the bypass now, isn't he, on the slip road, waiting to rejoin. Now, the tarmac runs all the way down that straight and blends. Why do you drive over the grass?
I think he got a puncture in the right, maybe it's just the angle of the car. Look at the track, there's a little bit of camber there, just looks slightly out of kilter.
He's about to be monstered by the other team's car. 77 is that, and that is Patrick Kuyler at the wheel.
There is the 87 Mercedes, looking to see if that's not on the top 20 either, so where is it? I can't see it on the time you're scoring. 87. Oh, the second. Is it second place? It is. It is.
87 is second.
Yes,
yeah.
it is.
So how BMW's getting on? We've talked about Philipp Eng in 99, but he's 16th, the Austrian driver, former Porsche champion, multiple Porsche champion. How is 98, the other Rover car, getting on? Marcus Paltler is only 40th, which is a bit odd.
Again, just a work and schedule.
Yeah, true.
So no massive, I would say, concerns at this stage.
Patrick Kujala has just gone from 40-something to 11th, as you might expect from a guy that was dominant in Lamborghini racing a couple of seasons ago. Philipp Eng down to Brooklands.
We've got, just out of curiosity, top 14 cars covered by just under a second, and expect that to tighten up as we progress through this session. Just over 30 minutes to go as the number 2 Audi makes its way past.
And just going back to the times, John, you talk about how tight things can be. The difference between what was the Daniel Kylwitz Ferrari and the Stephen Kane Bentley, 1,000th of a second. That is how tight it is.
But you want that 1,000th of a second on your side.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, that sounds, I mean, you could barely measure the length of time. But to a racing driver, I'm slower.
Yeah. Now, number 2 Audi hustles on. And this, and again, when it's an Audi, you've got to look a long way down. Nathaniel Berton, 20 seconds.
Yep.
The days of Audi being the dominant brand have gone, haven't they?
I think the way, just the pace in general, and also maybe Audi no longer with Laurent Van Thor, the driver that they always knew would deliver whomever they had employed in the other cars, so he's gone off to other challenges. And I just think, again, the competition has become more and more intense as this 2017 season has progressed. The key to the Audi's performance, particularly the WRT, but the ISR Audi as well, is their excellence in the pits. And if you can't make up places on the track, it's an awful lot easier to make them up in the pit lane. And it's much easier, I should say, not much more easy, that's not very good English. It's much easier to defend from a position of strength than it is to try and attack.
But also within WRT, some engineers have left and gone to other programs, other teams, and you wonder how much of an effect that is having as well. And I have to say, Vincent Voss has been a little anonymous this year. I don't think I've seen him at a race meeting yet this season.
He was a Brands Hatch, but the previous day he'd been at Spa-Francorchamps, because they run a car in LMP2, and he was supporting that. So clearly, the team diversifying into other disciplines. But Tristan Vautier in the 88 car right now. So this is the car that has the fastest lap to date in the hands of Daniel Juncadella. So Tristan Vautier, who was very successful last year, enjoyed some wins in the HTP car.
Back from racing in America, isn't he? Single-seaters. With success. Hustles on. Puts the power down and the car squirms from underneath him. '55, the Fisichella Ferrari has jumped up all the way to 22nd. I don't know where it may have been, but Giancarlo Fisichella Ferrari 55 up into 22nd position. So on this current lap, he's got a personal best in first sector. Assuming he can maintain that progress, maybe we'll see that 55 Ferrari get onto page 1 of the timing and scoring. Nice to see Giancarlo Fisichella on page 1. You have to say that's where he ought to be. Yeah.
And James Collado, of course, one of the drivers sharing the 55 Ferrari with Giancarlo Fisichella, and Marco Ciocci is the other driver in that car.
Rob Bell's taken over 58 McLaren and has got it up the order. Just there, in fact, the car ahead of it in the times is the Mercedes of Hunter Abbott, who didn't know he was doing this until Thursday evening, when he got off the plane from Lanzarote, turned his phone on, had a phone call from Tim Sugden to say, "What are you doing this weekend? Do you want to come to Silverstone and race a Mercedes?" And he did.
At one stage, I thought, I'm not sure it was at Monza or maybe at Brands Hatch, that Tim Sugden might be actually a stand-in driver.
He does so much.
Was that just a bit of, goodwill hunting type thing, or
he is racing in the Blancpain GT Asia series, but he also
Tim Sugden?
Yeah. Still
He's
quick.
my generation.
No. But he does quite a lot of driver management.
Yeah, no, he's a very capable guy.
Yeah. So he's here. I mean, one of the drivers he looks after is Sam Tordoff. There are others. And he has, because Grupper M, which is a team he's very involved in, has a Mercedes link. Mercedes said, look, we've got a driver shortage. Can you think of anybody? And he rang Hunter Abbott. And so...
Get your bag and kit up to Silverstone.
Yeah.
What a nice surprise.
Don't unpack, just get your license and keep driving.
Can you imagine a more pleasant surprise getting off a flight from Lanzarote than that?
And Hunter jumped at the chance, I tell you. And actually, although he's had a couple of years in British touring cars, GT racing is probably where he's ideally suited, really, because he's a good, consistent driver. And there is Giancarlo Fisichella. Now, John wanted him on page 1 of the Times. He's got him on page 1 of the Times because he's 17th in the Kaspersky Ferrari.
But he's a second, just a fraction of a second away from getting to the very top of page 1. So Giancarlo makes his way round through Abbey, then all the way up to this somewhat divides opinion farm curve, village, loop.
Have you done many laps around this new configuration?
Certainly not in a race car at all. I've done it in a road car. And
what do you think?
Don't quite get it.
Right. Okay. Is it a challenge for the drivers?
No, not in the sense I know what a challenge is. But when you've raced on great circuits around the world like Watkins Glen and the old Interlagos, I mean, forget about the Nordschleife. It's not what I would describe as a challenge. What makes it less of a challenge is the fact that they've got options and lines, and again you've got all those open country spaces around you. For me, the challenging corners are challenging because there are clearly defined restrictions or limits, and those are the things that focus the driver. When you've got wide open spaces, it's not quite so focusing.
Okay. Now the Porsche continues. Robert Renauer had his spin early on in the session, that is Ollie Jarvis.
Well, I just wondered, did the Porsche recognise the Bentley coming through? Because the pace of Ollie Jarvis, there was no room for margin of error there. Likewise, the 85 Mercedes that followed through.
Yes. And the Porsche has Jürgen Hering at the wheel, who is the AM in the Pro-Am car. But he's already had a race today. He was in the GT Sports Club race early on. 85 Mercedes, we saw a moment ago, Edward Sandstrom at the wheel of that. Still takes a bit of getting used to, him in not an Audi.
Exactly. And I mean, it's just sort of strange thing, Oliver Jarvis, I mean, seeing him not on an LMP1 car.
Yeah.
And, such a big change in dynamic between an LMP1 car and a GT3 car. The big change, of course, is that the level of downforce is maybe a factor of 5 or 6. And the Bentley, make no mistake, has got tons of downforce.
On board with Jarvis, this is Copse. Wide open space on the left. Runs up onto the curb. Pressing the different buttons on the steering wheel to do something. Catches the traffic in the Beckett's S's now.
Yeah, he's up behind one of the Ferraris, and of course, the momentum. He might try to swoop around the outside, but I think he probably recognises that the Ferrari is not really going to concede, so he goes up the inside and then swoops around the outside of Chapel. So Oliver Jarvis, and that's going to cost him the best part of a second anyway. And it's a shame because he's got a lot of clear racetrack directly ahead of him. Now, the way Ollie Jarvis is opening the throttle there, it sounds to me like it's not quite the slam we saw from Chris Goodwin.
Okay.
It's more, I mean, not to say old school, because Ollie's not old school, but I mean, just a balancing the car and the steering and the throttle coming through Club Corner. Now let's listen into Abbey. He has to get out of it. There's no flat out through Abbey and draw in breath.
How hard is it for a driver to go from an LMP car with all that downforce to a GT car?
It's a lot more difficult than doing it the other way around.
Right.
In my view, I didn't have to do it particularly often in my career, but the one time I did do it, it was a culture shock that I do not want to repeat ever.
So Ollie Jarvis, he's in fairness still involved in LMP2, isn't he, with success, but coming down Wellington Straight now and turns his way into Brooklands, gets it tucked in, hits the curb in the final part of the corner, now to Luffield.
sort of making it a 2 apex. Corner runs pretty wide on the exit, but now he gets it lined up to come through. Woodcut comes across start finish line. The time, of course, no reflection at 2:04. That car is in 6th place on a 2:00. That last lap was just over 4 seconds slower. Again, delayed behind the Ferrari up at this part of the racetrack 1 lap ago.
So Oliver Jarvis presses on, 6th overall he is now. Of course, he never got to drive at Monza, but he's going to hopefully be able to shine this weekend.
But we did get to interview him on the grid, didn't we?
We did. And he even joined us, came all the way over to the booth. So he works his way down now towards Stoke Corner, turns his way through the right, and down through Vale goes the number 7 Bentley. Now the 50 Ferrari we've not seen much of yet, but third it is in the Pro Cup, and it's now Alessandro Pierguidi, the ever spectacular at the wheel.
Yes, Alessandro Pierguidi, and of course co-driven with Michele Rugolo. So there is Alessandro Pierguidi, and that is a quick car.
Very much so. But Alessandro for the moment will pit, 23 minutes and change on the clock. And of course it's worth drivers doing these pit stops because they get a feel for where the pit in line is, where they need to slow, and like Michael Schumacher would used to do, practice the pit stops rather than coming into the pits cold, as it were.
Yeah. Difficult to do a proper practice pit stop because the way the cars are in the pit lane, they're actually just lining up in echelon. In other words, they're sort of 90 degrees to the pit lane. So to do a full-blown driver change, tyre change, fuel fill, whatever, would not be easy. You'd have to have a lot of cooperation from those people around you to allow you to have that privilege. Now, teams may work with each other and do so, but if you put all 55 cars in the pit lane, you couldn't put them line to stern.
Yeah, sure.
There's just not enough room.
Of course, some of the teams that can do that, because they've got so many cars, they've got the space, WRT, AF Corsa, for example.
Yeah,
but
HTP.
Yes, indeed so, in normal circumstances, yeah, I agree with your point. 27, the orange Team Lazarus Lamborghini. This is the Nicolas Pola, Gustavo Iacom and Fabrizio Crestani car. And it's Crestani at the wheel of it at the moment, and he's probably one of the quicker drivers within that lineup. But where is it in the times as he comes over the line? The orange Lambo is 27th, in fact.
New fastest car, 99 BMW.
Philip Heng, 2 minutes 0.327. So it's the best time of the day.
You were asking where are the BMWs a minute ago. Well, that's people are doing. They're just taking their opportunities. And car 88, by the way, must respect track limits at T1, and 42 must respect at T1 as well.
So the answer to where are the Rover BMWs, one is fastest, Philip Heng, but the other car is 44th, Jesse Krohn at the wheel of it. So
well, we know that car is a quick car.
Yeah, it will get there.
It'll get there. I mean, that's not representative of what the car can do.
Mercedes Nissan through, chasing the Audi R8 up the road.
So where are the Nissans 22 and 23? They've dropped off.
Yeah, 23 is 25th.
25th and 22 is
43rd.
Oh my goodness.
But that's got Matt Parry now behind the wheel, so it should be quicker.
Well, I would like to think because Matt Parry was pretty strong, one of my little heroes. I think from Monza, there's the car that is currently fastest of all. Philippe Eng behind the wheel. So it makes his way out of club corner, and then that run up. Just it's hard to tell when you're not on board whether there's just a breathe on the throttle or a lift, depends on the efficiency. The BMW is a pretty impressive chassis from those that I've spoken to, so they can maybe just eke out a little bit more speed through Abbey.
And Philip Eng seems to have been in this car for the bulk of the session. We haven't talked about many other of the drivers of 99 actually getting behind the wheel of it. And just to remind you, it is Alexander Sims and Maxime Martin who he shares with.
There's a yellow flag being waved briefly. It's coming down Wellington Straight, or was that just an illusion on my part? Maxime Martin actually being credited with being behind the wheel of the car, as opposed to Philippe Eng, who we're getting on timing and scoring. So is that comes into the pits? Now, I can understand, I mean, Maxime Martin is sort of legend in the BMW, but the credit to the time has gone to Philippe Eng. So hopefully we'll get a sort out on who is behind the wheel of that car, who was the driver that recorded that quickest time.
Well, the transponder setting is in Philippe Eng's place, so we're not quite sure why that graphic came up with Maxime Martin's name, but we'll try and get to the bottom of it. And 19 minutes on the clock, as there you have the Jaguar at the back of the pack, and Oliver Morley's Mercedes, the blue one, coming down Hanger Straight. Quite a long way down in class, actually, that car at the moment. Miguel Toril at the wheel of it. As at Lamborghini 63, there's a change of driver.
Well, that's not Mirko Bortolotti. He's
Caldarelli,
blinked about 10 times, hasn't he?
Yes, quite. Andrea Caldarelli, it is. I think I'm right in saying it's got it in the car. Yes, it is. Part of Lamborghini's Young Driver programme. So with 20 minutes to go, just under, cycle your next driver in, give him some mileage. The slowest, oddly, having not done many laps, is the number 14 Jaguar.
I think because it's only done 3 laps, that probably is the reason.
Yeah. Oh, and having said that, it just moved up. Because it's disappeared off page 3 and it's gone to 22nd, from 55th to 22nd, having now done 7 laps, and Albert Costa 2 minutes 1.644. Good, panic over. Now this car was quick at Monza, especially when Davide Rigon was behind the wheel of it, and Miguel Molina has put in 8th fastest at the moment. The SMP Racing Ferrari.
At the minute, watching these 2 practice sessions, it's almost impossible to get a sense or a feel of which of the manufacturers is going to be the one that's going to sort of end up, let's call it pole position, because although we've now got a BMW and we've got a Mercedes second and Mercedes third, Ferrari fourth, in the Lamborghini, Christian Engelhardt has been behind the wheel of that, which we just saw the driver change taking place. No real clear pattern as the 72 Ferrari peels off, comes into the pit lane, and coming in quickly up to the point where you've got to slow down to 50 kilometers per hour. And then the long pit lane, depending where you are. I always tend to favor being at the end of a pit lane. For some reason, I always think it's a slight advantage, particularly when you leave your box, to be almost immediately onto the racetrack rather than having to go down the pit lane slowly after your pit stop. I don't know why, but...
Now through the traffic, Wriggles 86 Mercedes. Another of the HTP fleet of cars. And that one now is Hunter Abbott. We were discussing him earlier on. He presses on up through Farm now.
Yeah, it's 31st at the minute,
yeah.
That car is.
It's a car he knows because it's the one he races, or the type of car at least he races in the Blancpain GT Asia series. And had a podium there in the first round at Sepang with Raffaele Marciello in the first race of the season.
Well, I'll tell you, having that hot rod along beside you is going to be an education.
Is it ever? And somebody else that's gone quicker, another of the HTP squadron, Franck Pereira, 2 minutes 1.028, so he's up to 12 now. Oh, what a fine looking car, John.
Beauty in metal. So it's being pushed away. And when I said that, had that car had 3, what I would call, let's say 3 factory drivers behind the wheel, the pace that the Porsche had was very, very impressive. And I'm not the only person that sort of would have hypothesized that potentially was a winning car, race winning car, not well, that would have been a pro car, so it would have been winning overall.
But you do wonder when it will be that Porsche comes back to a GT program. The World Endurance Le Mans win, box tick. There's a new Carrera Cup car introduced this year that'll get rolled out into national championships next year. Then perhaps it will start to look at GT racing again. Hunter Abbott up the curve.
I mean, well and truly coming through the closure of the Beckett sequence of corners, wheel right front, right rear, well over the curve indeed. This car 7 must respect track limits at turn 7. Car 75 must do so at turn 1.
So Oliver Jarvis is 7, and who's in 75 at the moment? That's the ISR Audi, Clement Schmidt. 8 pushed away. And meantime, in the Bentley showroom, it is great to have the brand on the grid, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's a fine name, and the commitment Bentley has shown has been impressive.
Absolutely. I mean, the people tend to think of Bentley as a gentleman's sporting carriage. But if you think back to the halcyon days of when Bentley in the 20s and early 30s were winning Le Mans in the historic and lauded 4.5 litres, and then supercharged in the 6 litres and whatever else. It was only when they dropped out of competition and came back as a brand, first at Le Mans with a prototype, but now with a customer car. You can go into a Bentley dealer and effectively buy the same car. Okay, it'll be a GT3 version. It won't be this version, but it's, racing improves the breed, and nothing accelerates development quite like racing. As Malcolm Wilson keeps his weather eye well accustomed to working in cars, probably in less comfortable conditions.
Yes,
you muck up to your God knows where. In the side, well, actually now they've got much more sophisticated servicing areas, which are almost as comfortable and as clean as the garages here at Silverstone.
But he's overseeing what looks to be some work on the brakes going on in pit lane. A 63 Andrea Caldarelli now comes down towards Stoke Corner. Just 13 minutes to go as of now.
And we're talking about the 98 BMW. Jesse Krohn has actually made a little bit of progress.
Okay.
24th. So he's almost at the top of page 2.
Just ahead, in fact, Christian Kleen in 114, who
I
don't
Jaguar.
think ever actually drove in the race at Monza from memory. He obviously was there and he did drive in the practice sessions, but never got behind it in the race. Right, you're looking at Caldarelli on track and see how hard he's working.
Yeah, I mean, you notice his hand movements. I mean, thinking about Roberto Bortolotti, probably a lot less, steering input. And if you can drive with less input, then you don't unsettle the car quite so much. Again, the thing with doing an endurance race is it is a compromise. So how the car is set up is not for the one prima donna, although that doesn't know that they would try to do that. You have to make the car comfortable for all 3 drivers. But you can see that how much more steering, I mean, really working the front of the car very hard indeed, and maybe a little bit of inexperience on his part.
He's not somebody that's been to Silverstone very often, but as he works his way now over the timing line, and Caldarelli presses on up towards Maggots, under the hoarding, through the kink, and then into the Beckett's S's. Again, focusing on what's ahead of him. Can't even talk about a steering wheel, can you? Because it's not a proper wheel, it's just the joystick almost.
Yeah, but also been very aggressive in the first part into Beckett's, getting the rear wheel over the curb, and you can see he kicked up a bit of the earth that's by the side of the racetrack. So if the time reflects the amount of effort, he would go quickest overall.
So 63 down in the first sector by 8 tenths, really. Over 8 tenths. And traffic ahead as well.
Al DaCosta and the Jaguar up to 15th.
Yep.
And improving on this current lap, in his case, lap 11. It's a personal best in the first sector, so the 14 Jaguar slowly creeping forward.
At what point, if at all, in this session, would they think about putting some fresh tyres on and going for a dummy qualifying round? Or would you not bother?
I probably would save the tyres for the session in the morning rather than running them now. They will have some sets of tyres which are less mileage than others. I can't imagine anybody would really want to put a new set on at this phase, because to do qualifying in the morning as opposed to running at this time in the afternoon, we're now coming up to nearly 5 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah.
So the race will be 2/3 of the way through. So unless we're going to have a miserable afternoon on Sunday, which I doubt very much, I can't see how much you're going to gain by running a new set of tyres right now, other than for the pleasure of it. But in the meantime, 22 has just gone fastest overall and up to 6th place. And that is the Nissan. Is
Matt Parry.
Matt Parry again.
And James Collado is about to go to the top as well, because he's done an absolute best and a personal best. And the Kaspersky Ferrari,
he's gone quickest,
goes over the timing line and does a 20.322 quicker by 5 thousandths of a second.
Not surprised, because the Ferrari is a quick car. We saw that in Monza.
There it is.
There it is, the Kaspersky car now being rather sort of unfortunately held up by an AM. That's part of the give and take. It is the quickest car in the AM category. Nevertheless, the quickest car overall is struggling. I mean, that's unfortunately inappropriate. I mean, just total lack of use of mirrors. And Collado will not be very happy now. Now is he going to go side by side and slow him down? I imagine that's what James Collado has in his mind. That's not necessary. I mean, I know everybody's out there doing their best, but you have to have track awareness. If you're not the quickest car on the track, then your track awareness has got to be even greater.
Jack Driver was the driver of the slower Ferrari. He was not inexperienced, in fairness, but 29 fastest that car is, and James Collado impeded it.
That's the quickest time.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not exactly not hanging about, but its last lap was a 2:09, whereas its best lap is a 2:01.
Who is in 59 McLaren at the moment? Because they're on their last warning for track limits. Oh, Andrew Watson. Where's he from?
It must be a mistake.
Yeah.
It must be the transponder's not working.
That'll be it. Well, Andrew Watson, for the moment, is shown as being in 59. How many of the transgressions are his or his co-drivers, we don't know. But
we have to be open-minded about these things.
Yeah, that car is on its last warning.
Yeah. So James Collado has gotten free of traffic now, looking for a clear lap. 7.5 minutes remaining. Slows down in Luffield to get it lined up. Now hard on the throttle. Gets a drive out of the corner. Runs over the curbing. That's accepted. So comes through Woodcote. Let's listen. Still miss that naturally aspirated, the growl of that Ferrari.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. James Collado through. Now, how much did he lose on that lap? He
lost backed
6
out of
seconds.
it all. It was irrelevant. Whether there's anything left probably in the tyres, he's got a little bit of traffic further ahead, just midway through Beckett's as the other car. So whether this will come into play or not, but James Collado will be happy. He's got the McLaren ahead of him. So it's probably unlikely we're going to see an improvement. First sector time comes up. It's about 2/10, just under 2/10 down on the fastest overall first sector time. So it's going to be a very good time. Maxi Book, third place in the Mercedes. Didn't see him slip up there. Typical of Maxi Book, slips in through the back door and gets that time. Third quickest, 2 minutes 004.26. We've now got 1 second covering the top 22 cars. And the 22nd car is number 911.
The Porsche has crept in then. And the 23rd is Frank Stippler, who's only outside of the magic second by 96 thousandths. So James Collado in the traffic. He's got one of the Struan McLarens up the road and more Ferraris to get through.
Yeah, he's just got to be patient. There's nothing much he can do. He gets good assistance from one of the Ferraris. Maybe he can slip past the other one, as it runs very, very wide coming out of Aintree. So yellow flag at second sector. We wonder why that is. We didn't see anybody off the track or any car stopped. So again, this lap will not reflect the performance of 55 simply because of that yellow flag in sector 2.
Yes, trying to work out who it is, but we've not yet had confirmation of that. We've not seen anything out on track. Sector 2 is a long sector as well. It takes you. Oh, there it is. That's
Mercedes.
the Oliver Morley Mercedes 16, and it's Oliver Morley at the wheel.
So how did he get there? I mean,
He's spun out of Stowe, hasn't he?
I'm just trying to see where it is. It is coming out of Stowe. You're quite right, David. Well identified. Maybe got a little bit on the curb, and once the thing starts, it's one of those corners that every time you spin, the car goes off. And that tyre bale has seen an awful lot of action over the years. Oliver coming back with a very deranged rear wing.
And that car is due out in the next race because he's doing the sports club
What
race.
is this car?
Well, I think so. It's the same livery and everything.
Well, he's got bodywork rubbing against the left rear, which is not going to help there. We see the 84 Mercedes. So Maxi Book still in third place. So 23, Alex Buncombe up into top 10 in 9th place. So we've got 2 Nissans, 7th for Matt Parry and 9th for Alex Buncombe.
And Oliver Morley, one of the few that's actually had any damage in this. Now, Maxi Book, third fastest, another of the top drivers, and back at home, isn't he, really, with an HTP Mercedes? That's where he made his name.
Yes, the HTP did have a Bentley in 2015 season. Didn't, for some reason, never quite fully understood why they didn't get to grips with the Bentley, because it was a very winning car in that 15 season. There is Ollie, and it's a long way back and needs to be, I mean, ideally that will not be the car he's going to race. A little later he's decided, yes, pull over. This will be certainly a full course. Well, it's just gone green, would you believe, in Sector 2 now. It'll be Sector 3. We'll have a yellow flag. The car well away from the exit of Club Corner. Nevertheless, in a tricky position is Giancarlo. Observing timing and scoring, as his car still retains that fastest overall, 2 minutes 003.322. 5 thousandths of a second between that and Maxime Martin, now showing in the 99 BMW. Book in third, and he's a 10th down. Oh, goodness, a 10th.
But it is so competitive. We've got 3 more minutes of the session to go. I'm just wondering whether Oliver Morley's car would stay there for 3 minutes, or whether they might put the checkered flag out a bit early, depending on when. Red flag. They say that's the answer.
Yes.
I think it stopped early.
In effect, that's the session.
It's over, isn't it?
Pretty much over.
Yeah.
I mean, well, if they're going to stop the clock, no, the clock is continuing, so the session is effectively now concluded.
Session will not be resumed. It's confirmed on the timing screen. So the car on the track. It's not easy to get to. Even if you did a full course yellow, it would eat into the remaining time, so you might as well stop it and get the car moved. So at the end of the session, James Collado is the fastest, 2 minutes 0.322. Maxime Martin's BMW second, 2 minutes 0.327. Maxi Book Mercedes third, 2 minutes 0.426. What can we take away from the 2 sessions today as a what have we learned going into tomorrow's race, or is it still an unknown until we get to qualifying?
It's an unknown, and even looking down, the 97 Aston Martin was quickest this morning. It doesn't make it into the top 20 that I can see this afternoon.
41st.
Well, what does it tell you? I mean, this morning's time is a 2:005. That would be good enough this afternoon to be 5th quickest. So I think we're going to have a very interesting qualifying. I think there's going to be an enormous amount of pressure on everybody, because the key, as is ever the case, but particularly at Silverstone with 55 cars on track, it's going to get, you've got to be at the front of the grid. There's going to be arguably 20 cars that will be battling for the first page in timing and scoring. Thereafter, they'll have to work it out as best they can.
So Giancarlo Fisichella, Marco Chiocci, James Collado end the session as the fastest combination of drivers. Giancarlo, who's been here to many a British Grand Prix, puts his jacket on. Kaspersky Motorsport, that came into this series with Gary Kondakoff, the COO of the company, within the Pro-Am category. He decided that he was better served in the GT Sports Club, but it was a good platform for the brand, so it's now become a sponsor.
Yeah, and I think a very good decision.
Yeah, and it's good because it's a brand people know of, and it's not a motoring industry associated brand per se.
Cyber security, bearing in mind the news over the last 24 hours, that's going to be a brand that's certainly going to be in demand.
Oh, well, I thought so. So spread the message. Red flag at the end of pre-qualifying, and the fastest car is the Ferrari with James Collado doing a time at 2 minutes 0.322, ahead of the Alexander Sims, Maxime Martin, Philippe Eng BMW, Jimmy Eriksson, Maxi Book, Franck Pereira, Mercedes. Then the Vautier Sarales Juncadella Mercedes from Jules Gounon doing the time ahead of Alessandro Pierguidi. Matt Parry up to 7th ahead of Mirko Bortolotti. Then it was the Ordonez Chiyo Buncombe Nissan Daniel Kalvitz doing the time to be 10th ahead of Ollie Jarvis and then Miguel Molina. Looking a little further down the times, and one to look for come qualifying is going to be number 8 Bentley with Andy Soucek. The McLaren number 59, Dean Stoneman, Jasmine Jaffar, who won here last year, and Andrew Watson, 19th. And Patrick Cuyler's Lamborghini, 22nd, just to pick out one or two more at random. The Porsche, the sole Porsche, 24th, ahead of the Frank Stippler, Philip Salaquada, Clement Schmidt, Audi, 25th. Jamie Green, Jake Dennis, Stuart Leonard, 26th. Rory Butcher in the Ferrari, 27th. The Meadows Mortara Marciello Mercedes a long way down, given how well the sister cars are going, but let's wait and see how it goes in qualifying. And the same true of 98 BMW, Bruno Spengler, Marcus Paltela and Jesse Krohn, the driving force of that. 37th after a spin, Miguel Ramos, Hunter Abbott's Mercedes that he shares with Damien Faulkner, and Mike Skeen 38th. Ben Barnicoat, Rob Bell, Cum Ledegar 39th. We'll wait and see how that fares in qualifying. Johnny Adam and Ahmad Al-Hafi a long way back in that session. And Dennis Lynn, last year's Lamborghini Super Trofeo champ, 45th in his Lamborghini. 55 cars in total, the slowest of which was the Henry Valkenhorst BMW, just behind the Bernard Delhay Lamborghini that Bernard shares with Mike Stursberg. Welcome back, the former Haribo racing driver, and Gilles Vanelay. So, today's track activity for the Blancpain GT series completed, and the cars will be out bright and early tomorrow morning at just after 9:40 for qualifying. Having a look at some of the best bits of the session. Not necessarily a best bit for Robert Renard because he was an early spinner. Daniel Kalvitz was very quick early on in the Ferrari. The Rinaldi Racing entry, the German driver hustling on as the Ben Barnicoat McLaren did likewise. Number 2, Nathaniel Berton was a long way down the order, 35th, and others to explore the outer limits of the circuit included Treble 7 Lamborghini, Bernard Delhay's car. But at the end of the session, it was James Collado who was the fastest. The AF Corsa Ferrari coming through to be the fastest. Other Ferraris slightly impeding other cars as they just got the wrong line at the wrong time. Not deliberate in any way, but traffic is always an issue when you've got such a big grid of cars. So we go to the 3-part qualifying session in the morning with Ferrari ahead of BMW, ahead of Mercedes, first, second and third. There's a lot to look forward to tomorrow morning for qualifying. Join us for that if you can. For now though, from John Watson and me, David Addison, bye-bye.